I'm going to kind of get back into the middle just a little bit here, kind of in the midst of the struggle, in the midst of your transition, and of course all that kind of forced on you. What did you do? What did you do for you when you knew that the world was going to change for you, but you were still resistant to it, or you're still having trouble with the change? You know, all of us resist change in some way, whether it's one that we choose or one that's forced upon us. How did you deal with those dark days? How did you deal with the change being forced upon you?
In all reality, I had to break first to rebuild. I had to acknowledge that I was never going to be perfect. Even to this day, I acknowledge that I'm never going to be a perfect person. I think little changes, whether it's in perspective. I think my perspective is the biggest reason I've grown into who I am today. Because of all the struggles and dark days that I've had, it's taught me to just that gratefulness, like I told you earlier. It's just the piece of, it could always be worse. There's always someone doing worse. Yes, there's people doing better, but I have to acknowledge the fact of I'm not in a jail cell as a 14-year-old. You know, my mom and dad are both alive. Like, there's people around me that I've lost that meant a lot to me, and that's of value. And everybody looks at monetary things, but that's something. Life is so valuable, you can't put a dollar price on it. And having that perspective of like genuine friendships, people who care about you, that can carry you through those dark days. And some of it's yourself, but you're never gonna achieve the financial success by yourself. You need clients, you need peers, you need business partners, you need banks, you need relationships, and carrying yourself from those dark days and having that scope of the life circumstances, and then it helps you build everything else around it, and the business stuff will come. I'm a strong believer, if you do things for the right reasons, the money will come. But I don't lead with a sale. I lead with, this is me, you could decide to do business with me. But the dark days are I'm sure I'm going to have more struggles in my life, but the stuff that I've experienced is far behind me. It was a lesson, it was an experience, but it was also the foundation for who I am today.
It was a heck of a day, the day that we're talking about here, the day that you showed up to school with a gun. And I'm sure there's a whole lot of people that have got a lot of opinions about what happened to you and to the people around you on that day. I would like to hear from you what that moment means to you now in regards to personal responsibility and accountability. One of the things that many of us earmark as a necessary step in transformation of our own change, taking control of that, is to recognize what agency and what responsibility we had in situations. How do you see that day play out that way? And where do you feel personal responsibility and accountability come to bear there?
I'm 100% in the wrong. I never shy away from that. I mean, the personal accountability, I've always been accountable to myself. The first thing is I'm thankful nobody got hurt. The second thing is I did what I thought was best at that moment based upon what I learned in my life. And I'll never justify it. That's why I pled guilty to the charges that I did. I think I took my consequences on the chin, and do I think it was very excessive from the state side? Yes, I do to this day. I think if I had an opportunity to tell my side of the interaction, maybe the public perception would have been different, but that's not important now. But as a 14-year-old to maybe probably 25, I had to carry that burden of feeling like an outcast, feeling like, I think that's probably the best word. But I feel it's my responsibility to today to show people that you don't have to make those decisions. There's better outlets. There's better avenues for growth. Understanding, as educated as I am now, I could have probably excelled a lot faster in life. Yes, I'm accomplished, but did I always want to be an accountant? No, I had dreams like any other kid. But that doesn't mean I still can't accomplish those things. That day doesn't define me. I think there's a level of responsibility to lead by example now that it was a bad moment, a bad decision. It costed me freedom, it costed me time, it costed me relationships, it costed me... I think even to this day there's a strain from my parents. You know, my dad refinanced his house. I'm sure it's been uncomfortable for him for the last 25 years. So there's so much collateral damage as I've gotten older that I reflect on. But in that moment, I can't take back what happened. I can apologize to the people that were victimized in that situation. And I say that wholeheartedly. I don't wish bad on anybody. But I also understand being accountable means accepting the man in the mirror regardless of what everyone else thinks. And that means good and bad. Some people are going to like me for who I am, some people ain't.
Mm-hmm.
But I can just be 100% who God made me and put that on display and let them make their decision.
There's freedom of that, I think.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can hold ourselves accountable way longer than anybody else, especially those of us that have been incarcerated. You get a sentence, you get a limited amount of time that you're supposed to serve, and then restitution is supposed to be met. You're supposed to be able to move on with your life. When the jail cell door opened and you were let out into freedom, is that how it just worked out for you? Just suddenly this day, then all of your cares were gone. You felt like you paid your debt and you had served your time and you were just ready to move on to the next stage. What was that transformation like? What was it like for you to try to move away from this to become something different?
You know, I think anyone who's been locked up can tell you it leaves emotional scars that most people don't want to talk about. I mean, most people who I've sat with who have experienced longer periods of incarceration, I'm not talking a couple days or a couple weeks, that true isolation, 23-1 is different than general population, that kind of stuff. And going through it at such a young age, it developed a level of insecurity that I probably even have to this day. There's social fears, anxieties, interacting with people. I became very introverted to the point where trust issues, you got to think I was locked up 200-300 kids with criminal records. So I'm questioning everything around me, sit with my back to a room, being, in fights, sucker punch in those kind of facilities, just stuff that you experience and see, seeing people be assaulted, stuff like that. It leaves emotional scars and wounds where you start to realize how cruel the world is, and so you carry that with you when you get out. And then it's never truly, you never could get back the innocence I had when I was 10, 11, 12, so 14, coming out at age 17, I have most of my peers getting ready to graduate high school, and I'm graduating from a juvenile facility, Yeah. Yes, I have the book smarts, but then I'm carrying all this other stuff that comes with it. So it was never no easy transition. As I wrote the book, it's almost like we wanted to make this leap of Manny became a perfect businessman. That was never the case. I still had the struggles. The family dynamics didn't change. I went back to hustling and doing the same things I learned before jail. I did that for another 5 or 6 years. And it took me getting arrested again in my early 20s for another argument, not a fight or nothing, but it was a similar violent offense, and spending the night in jail. And that was the moment where I was like, I promised myself I would never be back here. And that was the moment I stopped smoking weed. So it wasn't no quick transition. Mm-hmm. It took, you said you were going to hit that pothole again, bam, face first, Right. And so as I started to do that, and then I started to get back in school and better myself, it's just been trial and error. And then I started to just say, okay, I don't like the way that felt. I don't like So it's we just talked about it a minute ago. You know, going through the fire, it'll burn off the things you don't like, and losing people, it'll be like, oh, I don't want to lose someone else. Loving someone the wrong way will teach you how to love, and being incarcerated, it just taught me that I need to be self-sufficient to a point from a financial perspective, but I don't want to be. I don't have to be. And just because I was raised around a bunch of people who maybe didn't necessarily show me the best ropes, not everybody's like that. You know, there's good people in the world. And so that's where being open-minded taught me to transition from that, and surrounding myself with better people has taught me to leave those wounds in the past. There's still the emotional scars. I acknowledge it, but I don't live in that depressed state, or, you know, because if that was the case, I could have easily went back down the road, and maybe that's where the repetitive cycle of other people that are in the system comes from, because they're focused on the stuff that went wrong instead of focusing on what can be better.
That's pretty powerful.
And that's the piece where I think growth can happen. And anybody, I mean, you know, and I have friends who have served a lot longer time than me, and, you know, it's funny, I have a friend who did 14 years, and he tells me, he looks up to me, he's older than me, so he's a bigger guy, so he's like, you know, you inspire me, man, because it just shows me that you can change your life. And it's the perspective, though, and I'm trying to coach him to speak. You just look at things from a different lens, and it brings that gratefulness. And it's like, yeah, I can be back in the system, but I'm grateful, you know? And it's like, does he have the job he wants at this point? Probably not. Does he have the life or the perfect family? No. But you're not incarcerated. Freedom is everything, and time is something you can never replace. We could always make more money, you know, time you can't get back. That's the one currency that isn't replaceable.
Mm-hmm. I know as an accountant, you've got to be a bit of a creature of habit, right? Are you a creature of habit to some degree?
Of course.
What are some of the habits that you have or have changed about yourself to make you be more successful? What did you have to change about yourself? A few of the things.
That's one thing I can say incarceration did teach me, was habit.
Mm-hmm.
Get up, make my bed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, eat lunch. Like, it taught me that repetitive nature that I maybe didn't have before being incarcerated. And coming out, I kept that. And I think the biggest thing that I taught myself is I spent 21 months staring out a window hoping to do something. All this time on my hands counting minutes, like, oh, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? And once I got in a good mode and a good mental state, I fill up my day. So I'm always trying to do something productive. If I'm sitting idle, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And it's had its pros and cons. Like I said, it's probably costing me relationships, it's costing me a lot of stuff at this point, but it's also brought me accolades and stuff that I necessarily wouldn't have if I maybe operated on a 9 to 5. So filling up my day, it's still stuff that I'm navigating, delegating, and now that I'm a father, I need to cut back a little bit and get back in family mode, because it's not just me. But that's what I do, is try to fill up my day, and I look at it like a math problem every day. Is cut this out, I plan ahead, and I make sure to stick to a schedule.
That really helped me too. You know, I appreciate you talking about. I was in the military. You don't get much of a choice about the routine of your day. You know, somebody's going to get you up at what time they think you need to get started, and this is just your life now, right? Yeah. One of the things, especially coming out of incarceration and going back to a world that you were taken from, you know, oftentimes we talk about the situation or the circumstances that we're in limit what our options are, or sometimes even build an inevitable current that we get caught up in. You know, it seems like some of these decisions we don't even have a choice about whether or not we get to make those. When you came out of incarceration, and you one of the things that you talked about a little bit earlier was maybe the crew or the crowd or the people you were hanging with. What things had to change when you came out? And we talked a little bit. You kind of went back into that old life versus the new life until the second problem that you had. What things did you have to change to find success? What were the things that kept holding you back that you finally had to kind of shed?
It was drastic. Education. education was the biggest investment I've ever made in myself. It was a brutal grind for 4 years, working a full-time job, going to night school. Got married at an early age, and just dealing with that responsibility, it brought me support in ways that I didn't have at a younger age. I respected the people around me at the time, and it brought, I think, stability. And so finding people that cared about me brought stability that maybe I didn't have from immediate family at a younger age, and that came from my ex-spouse's family at that moment.
And you found some solace there too.
Yeah, and maybe it was a level of love I maybe respected in that moment, which it was odd because I don't have that today, but it was in that moment.
It was in that moment. All right, I'm going to move us through while they're setting up real quick. I'll go ahead and move us through the next set of questions. So that was kind of the end of the middle there. The next set is how is what you're doing going to affect the world? How by you telling your story, what are we looking to do to change the world for a better place, kind of a thing. That's what these questions are. So, what changed, or what fell into place for you that made you think that your story wasn't just your own story of personal perseverance? It wasn't just a story for you to keep to yourself. What made you feel like this is something you wanted to share with people?
I think sometimes I feel people perceive me as I've had it easy because of the level where I'm at, maybe like the financial accomplishment, some of the accolades, and I'm by no means a millionaire or anything, but I think I look pretty comfortable. And I feel like some people take the attitude of, oh, you've had it easy, or you've done this, and a lot of times I speak from a place of experience, and I think a empathetic person to the point where I can tell when someone's hurting, I can tell when someone's hiding something. I've been in environments where it's like, hey, you're struggling, and I think it's just a deep care for humanity to the point where, like, I notice you're in a bad spot. I notice maybe your family dynamic is out of sync, or we're all struggling, but I also think I've matured to a point where I have a lot to offer others. And just because I've had to do that growing up at a young age, like I said, most people were worried about prom. I was worried about paying mom's bills. So I think it's a level of wisdom comes with experience, not so much age. A lot of people get older, but they never mature.
Never getting smarter,
So that's a tough thing to deal with. And to fully answer your question, I want to just leave something to people who really just, it's, I don't know if I said it on this piece, but it's like you're going down a path, and it's like I stumbled down a mountain, and I'm just posting a yield sign for the next guy coming. Like, hey, you don't want to crash.
Look out for my mistake here.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that that's good. It came across there. I think that's one of those places that really moves all of us as groups, as a society together. If I have to live through every moment, and if I had to learn every experience myself, every fact, every piece of knowledge, if I had to earn every piece of that myself, our society, our world wouldn't be very far, would it?
Yeah.
Our ability to learn from each other's successes and mistakes, I think, is imperative for us to be able to find the future that we want, instead of being caught behind the 8 ball. So kudos to you to keep finding it and showing the way. How did you decide that parts of your story were the right ones to share? Talking about, it's hard sometimes to there's some situations that are non-deniable. Some things are put out in the public, and so you have to confront the situation. But that doesn't mean that you have to talk about everything. You've written a book. How did you decide what part of your story is appropriate to share with people?
I think my whole story, it's my story, so I think I get to pick and choose what pieces I share with who, when, and where. I don't think I've ever tried to victimize anybody or place names. The goal isn't to glorify any of the negative stuff that's gone on. It's to open the door to say, I've made mistakes. I have some level of accomplishments, not so much that I think, but my peers think I've done a good job. I want to share with you how I got here and relate to the fact of you may be going through something difficult, I think I've experienced a lot of difficult moments in my life, and I can maybe give some advice on how to overcome those obstacles.
Sharing our stories and putting ourselves in front of people. We talked just a little bit about this in our sidebar conversation before the interview. There's a bit of responsibility. You know, what was the statement your dad said that when you climb the ladder, what happens?
Your butt shows.
Your butt shows. How are you taking on the responsibility of sharing a story like this? What did you do to prepare or to think or to look out for, or have you considered the ramifications of telling a story like this out in the public space?
It could go both ways. I mean, there's always going to be people who disagree with my approach, no matter how good I do in life. I was wrong in that moment. Someone could have got hurt. There's parents that love those kids I had conflict with. 100%. I'm a father now, so I empathize with that stance. But there's also a crowd of people that know me today who would have never guessed I did those things in the past, which shows my level of resilience. It shows my growth, and I think there's also a mixture of a group of people who don't know my story, but they also have that perspective of what have you been through, like, oh, how did you get here? But it's been the lows that taught me how to chase the highs. You know, and it's not so much like I'm not chasing business success. That's never been the goal. The goal is just to live a better life. And with that has came accolades and spotlight. And I think I told you this morning, you know, it's like I pray about it sometimes and I'm like, God, why you want to push me down this path that I seem to be walking? And it's like, because the more you don't want it, you know, you don't want the spotlight, but it feels like God's going to shine it on you just because I'm myself. And I feel like that wholeheartedly is I'm not chasing a status or a check or anything of that nature. I'm just chasing to be a better father to my son, and if someone else can grow with me, then hey, let's go this way.
How has one of the things that I do here at the BTBY, when I coach somebody, whether it's for business or whether it's person or whether it's a youth, one of the things that I do is I have almost all of them go through our speaker course. Now, our speaker course is just a small class where we teach somebody to tell their message in a better and greater way. And I put everybody through this course that I can, whether you're ever going to speak on a stage or not. And the reason that I do is in that class, one of the things that we teach you to do is we teach you to craft that story and to be able to tell it in a way that's succinct to other people. And in that process, you make this transition where you go from being the student of your life to becoming the teacher of your life. And just like with any information, when you're the student of the information, you're in the information, you're almost too close to it to be able to see it. And as the teacher, when you stand outside of that process, you can see things that you can't otherwise. You have to understand the subject matter to a greater depth, because you're not just telling the answers on the page, which is what the student needs to learn. You need to understand this way more comprehensively so that you can explain it no matter what the question is. What have you learned for yourself and about your life by taking authorship of your own story in such a way as to go and tell other people what happened to you, what your experiences are? What have you learned about yourself in that process?
I learned a lot about myself being isolated, but I've also learned a lot about others through this process because we're all struggling. We're all hurt in some way. We're all overcoming obstacles. I've been able to interact with a lot of accomplished people over the last few years. And, you know, society gets us in this comparison state. And everybody is just chasing the same thing. We're all chasing happiness at the end of the day. And I think the modernized way is we think material brings happiness. It doesn't. The shirt I have on my back, the watch, like all that stuff's cool. It brings comfort. That's all it brings. But it doesn't bring peace. It ain't gonna bring back somebody that you lost. You know, that's the piece where if anybody could learn anything from me is learn that gratitude, to be thankful for the stuff that money can't buy. Because we all can collectively make money together. That's great. but we can't take the money to the grave. You know, we can't hug somebody with $100 bill. You know, I mean, I say that like with good intentions, but I mean, you can't wipe your tears with money. Like, that's just certain stuff that I've learned where I think I've been the same person before I ever made $1, and I hope to be the same person I've ever touched $1 million. That's the goal, you know, is but also take those resources and invest in stuff that's going to help others, not just so I could sit up in a new car or a fancy house. It's nice to work hard and have the fruits of your labor, but not to the point where it's an excessive and you're big-headed. You know, that's not my goal. I want to help people.
That's what we got you here, man. When people hear your story, I know you probably get a lot of mixed emotions, and it probably depends on whether they know the before story or the after story. There's oftentimes that I talk about the transition. Whenever you hear somebody speak, you know, you're going to hear two stories. You're going to hear this before story and the after story. And this part in the middle is where they took control. What do people say to you after they hear your story? And once again, it might be different depending on which story they heard first.
I think I'm getting mixed signals from a lot of perspectives. Business setting is, people are surprised of what I've been through. Mm-hmm. So that's one that makes me smile, because it's a good feeling when it's like, oh, I didn't know you accomplished this. Or I'll have a tax call with somebody and then they meet me in person. They're like, oh, you look 25. You know, so that type of stuff. Or they'll say, I didn't realize you've been through so much in your life is another piece of it. So it's almost like a happy moment, to the point of like, I've accomplished so much that it's such a backstory at this point, where it's out of sight, out of mind. But then I've also have the conversations where people relate more to the story than the actual business acumen, where they're like, oh, how did you overcome this? How did you tackle that? And that's why I started to write the book, where I sit down with the tax client and it's like, you know, someone would be like, oh, my son's locked up, or, you know, I get a lot of personal details for different stuff, and it's like, oh, I went through that. You know, make sure you just try to give a word of advice, and then it's kind of like peeling back an onion depending on the client or the person or the interaction. So I have hundreds of conversations like this without the masses, and I think people just appreciate my approach and my candid love for humanity. And I don't even want to say humanity, just for my clients, because it's a personal thing. It's like, I want you to win. Mm-hmm. If you win, you come see me next year. It's mutual, you know?
We'll keep winning.
Yeah. So, and just I don't want to see people struggle.
How do you avoid telling your story and making it sound like validation, as opposed to telling a story that's there to serve others?
I think validation comes from within. No one can validate you, truly. As if you're looking for acceptance from the crowd, you're probably doing things for the wrong reasons. But a leader wants to carry others with him forward. And so I think the difference between validation and I think validation is a popularity contest. I don't want validation, I want change. So that's the piece where I live by the motto, purpose over profit. Mm-hmm. If you live with a purpose, the money will come. Like, you can't approach everything money-minded. There's more to life than money. Because if I die today, it doesn't matter how much money I have. Like, like at the end of the day, you know, I think that there's very good people who are very good at making money. You know, it's funny because on the tax, I have to make sure you're compliant with the money you do make. Mm-hmm. But I also, you know, there's other stuff we pay taxes on. And that's what my book is about. Mm-hmm. There's a spiritual tax, there's a physical tax, there's a mental tax, there's stuff we put ourselves through on a daily basis that costs us more than money. Mm-hmm. And so how do I guess that's a question I'm still trying to answer internally is how do we collectively support each other without being money driven first, understanding that everything costs money. It's like counterproductive almost.
Karina is here.
Perfect. Is she ready for us?
Yeah.
That's a tough question because, like, you asked about impact over profit, and I think everybody, like, it's odd because, like, we all want to live comfortable, but, like, I'm the kind of person where I just don't want to chase money all day. Like, I'm really good at certain stuff, and I've been in positions where, like, people have offered me jobs, and it's like, yeah, I know you want to pay me more, but I'm not passionate about that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So, I've turned down profit for happiness.
And
Absolutely.
I'm like, you know, like, and I've had people who are like, and it's just, it has to just align with me as a person. So if it does, then I'll wholeheartedly do stuff, and I'm not chasing validation. I mean, I've invested in this stuff in myself, and I haven't made a penny.
Right.
Upwards of, I've spent a lot of money getting my message out there.
Right.
And thankfully, I've been in the position where I work hard, and that's not a big deal, but that's not the goal. The goal is to maybe get in these places where these kids are struggling, whether it's in the youth jails, and have them understand, like, hey, I've been where you're at. I hope if you could take bits and pieces of my story and apply it to your life, maybe you could achieve some level of success as well. And that doesn't mean financial. That means family healing, telling your mom you love them, not burying your niece at 18, you know, stuff like that. That really is more impactful than profitable.
Man, how can people find you?
www.aragontaxreturnservices.com. If you check out the website, all of my social media handles are there: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And I mean, we operate and can file taxes in all 50 states, so we would love to help anyone who needs that service. Other than that, I mean, I have a book release coming in a couple of months, and I think it'll be a good read for anyone who picks it up.
So it's coming out. It's not out yet.
No, so we're about 95% done with the manuscript. I got to pick the cover still. It's on my to-do list of all this stuff I got going on, but we're probably thinking end of March, early April.
So have you got a title yet?
Taxed by Life.
Taxed by Life. Taxed by Life. Man, Manny, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your information with everybody. If there was maybe one small message that you would leave, you know, somebody who might be looking or listening for a message, what would it be?
Invest in yourself and becoming the better you.
There it is. Thanks, Manny.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
You too.
See you guys next time.